any of the party leaders restore Canadians' faith in politics, and what does it say more largely? The Scrum is here to answer those questions. Stephanie Levitz is the Deputy Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Najoud Al-Maliz is a reporter with the Canadian Press, and Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Good to see you. Shachi, I'll start with you. As of April, this is the line that stood out to me in your analysis. As of April 24th, there has never been a time when leaders of all three parties simultaneously turned Canadians off to such an extent. Were you surprised that the data point matched the sense I feel like, I don't know if you guys share this, when people talk to me, just even on the street about it, like that's what they're saying to me?
Anecdotal meets the data, meets the objective, and it's a thing of beauty in nerd parlance to actually plot a 50-year trend line, and then when you see that snapshot data point, like look at that, look at how low all of them are. And just to contextualize this, there have been, of course, times where certain politicians have been profoundly unpopular at different points in Canadian politics, and we can sort of think about and name what they are. But what is unique about what's happening in 2024 relative to every other year we've plotted since 1974 is that all three major national federal party leaders are underwater in terms of their net favorability. That means the number of people who have a negative favorable view of them or an unfavorable view of them outnumber those who have a favorable view of them. Not only that they're all underwater, but they are all underwater to the extent that they are at the same time. And that's what makes it so unique, but again, so validating, if you will, if you're a Canadian voter out there going, I don't like any of them.
Does your gut, Steph, tell you that that sentiment is a reflection of the leaders themselves, or more of the kind of times we're in and the overall angst people are feeling about their lives and the lack of faith they have in general for political leaders to fix it?
I think a little of column A and a little of column B, right? I mean, there's also probably a distinction to be made or something to be said about the fact that people see their political leaders now in different ways than perhaps they saw them 20 years ago. And by that I mean social media, I mean viral memes. I mean, there's a lot of hostility leaped on all of the leaders' heads by their rivals that surface in people's social media feeds and elsewhere. So it's almost as though you're preconditioned to dislike someone as opposed to being conditioned to like them, right? And what I find, interesting about that, it'd be interesting to know, do Canadians hate their individual MPs as much as they dislike the political leaders? Because you think about all these MPs who've been in politics a really long time, the real constituency, grassroots guys that show up at every barbecue and kiss every baby, they can sometimes be very beloved in their communities in a nonpartisan way, even though people can't stand the leader of that party. I think that sentiment is shifting too away from local MPs.
I imagine, just as Steph points out, that a lot of it has to do with like the reinforcement of our negative views through social media algorithms and through like the strategies that the parties and the leaders are pursuing.
Yeah, I mean, this political divisiveness that people talk about is the same thing that's playing out in the U.S. I mean, Biden and Trump are both both have net negative favorabilities as well in this election of who do you hate less. And I think something similar is going to play out in Canada so long as these numbers hold. And I think what that means is that it's a different context than when you have one popular and one unpopular candidate, or let's say two maybe somewhat popular candidates. This is an election, again, of who do you dislike less? And that might play out differently than we may expect, because it really means that the candidate that wins is the one who's able to convince more people that don't like them to still begrudgingly vote for them.
I think that's actually already, it feels like it's already playing out to a certain degree, Shachi. In the last segment, we were talking about how the Liberals are really amping up their efforts to frame Poilievre, for example. I guess the question is, when there is a momentum for change, like, do you need to like the person? Do their net negatives need to be in a better position than they are now, or do you just have to tolerate them?
I think it's a toleration factor when there is an appetite for change, and after what's going to be probably by the time we get to an election 10 years of the same government, that appetite for change takes on a velocity and a momentum of its own. It's almost like a vacuum. It just keeps building and building, regardless of what people think about individual policies, or even if they are or are not sick of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and a lot of Canadians are expressing that they are, but that might change over time. Ultimately, if you've decided you want to change, then it's like, well, as a voter, what are they going to do to rationalize making that decision okay? We've heard the opposition pound hard on issues of cost of living, something highly resonant to Canadians, talking about crime and safety, drug decriminalization vis-a-vis crime and safety, all really accessible issues that are not hardcore ideological. The big question is, can government of the day, the Liberals, start to move that back the other way? But again, if they do, it's not going to be about going high while another party goes low. It's going to be about going on the attack, which just foments division even further.
Do you have a sense at all, Steph, about whether the parties feel like their leaders need to be, or Canadians need to be better acquainted with their leaders? You wrote a piece this week about a recent book that's being done about Poilievre. There's 2 new ones on Justin Trudeau. Like, do you think it matters to the parties if Canadians know who these leaders are?
I mean, it does matter, because if you think about, let's cast back a year and Mr. Poilievre's summer tour.
Yeah.
Right? A year ago, he was a relatively new leader of the Conservative Party. He gave himself a bit of an image refresh and to appeal to a broader demographic of people, allegedly. He went out on sort of a meet and greet style campaign tour, new ads, trying to frame him. So it's clear that image still matters. Whether, you know, for Mr. Poilievre, let's say in particular, does he care? Do they care that voters actually like them as people? I would argue that maybe they don't care. In the context of the Conservatives, all they're trying to do is make you hate Justin Trudeau and make you hate the Liberal Party and hope that that's enough to either A, just keep you home, and so you don't vote for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and ideally come to their corner and vote for them. But conversely with Mr. Trudeau, I mean, he said a few weeks ago, I don't care if I'm not popular. I'm not in this to be
It's become something he says a lot more of
popular,
now.
you know, and I find that's also telling. It's a recognition that leaders should not always be popular. That is not the point of leadership. It's not for everybody to love you. It's to make hard decisions that you believe are best for the country. But when more and more people are believing that those decisions are no longer best for the country, that's when your popularity starts tanking, and it does in fact become a problem.
Last word to you, Nishud.
Yeah, I think something interesting that's come up in this book that is that we all know in Ottawa this, but what we learn in the book, and it reinforces, is that Poilievre is both a policy wonk, but he's also a very political person, you know, like he understands the game. The nicknaming that he does right now is something that stems back from his early years in politics. And he also appreciates power. So I think right now what's going to be interesting is how does he balance his interests in leading a Conservative government with his want for power? Because we see in polling that Canadians care about a lot of the Liberal marquee policies like childcare, like dental care, and I think it's going to be interesting how he goes into a campaign, what positions he takes, because I think that could actually shift things towards the Liberals or more in favor of the Conservatives, depending on how he walks that line.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the discussion. Nishud Almaliz, Steph Levitz, and Shachi Kurl.